Hey everybody, welcome back again to Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy, where the proof is in the singing. I'm continuing my series on doing these amazing takedowns of these incredible legendary songs with solo vocals, a singing tutorial, a singing analysis, talk about the recording process, some backstory about the bands, etc. Next up is Queen. In fact, I'm doing a Queen-a-thon. I'm going to do a whole bunch of Queen songs and dissect them, talk about, the orchestration, the writing process, etc. Killer Queen, speaking of Queen, is what's up next. Of course, you know the vocalist is Freddie Mercury. Now, I have a singing course. The course is called How to Sing Better Than Anyone Else. You can find it right here at kentamplinvocalacademy.com for you guys interested in learning how to sing. I also have a free singing forum over there that we discuss, negotiate, talk about all these amazing places for singing in hopes to help make you amazing at singing, right? With that said, I'm going to get started and just play it. Here we go.
She keeps a Moet Chandon in a pretty cabinet. Let them eat cake, she says, just like Marie Antoinette. Building a remedy for Khrushchev and Kennedy at any time, an invitation you can't decline.
All right, now, to get started, the first thing is if I didn't play the music behind that, you wouldn't really know quite what to make of the melody other than say, it sounds kind of cool, right? So I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna interpolate or interplay between adding the instrumental track and the melody and singing and whatnot, so we could talk about the process along the way, because it's really deserving of that, especially, albums like A Night at the Opera, where the orchestration is off the charts. And it's literally like they took a piece and they worked on it. Then they took another piece and they worked on it, and then they figured out a way to marry that together, or at least seamlessly kind of go through like an orchestrator would when, orchestrating a movie or something. It's very Broadway in its sort of approach. So think of this as you're listening to this with a view towards, wow, yeah, you're right. It's storytelling kind of Broadway style. So literally you could see a play or something and the story being kind of in the background with the band performing as such, but as a rock band. So like a rock opera in that sense. Queen, Night at the Opera, right? So let's do this again. And I want to go ahead and add the instrumental track. But I want to back up because, believe it or not, it's the beginning part that kind of sets it up. Let me explain. They start with some finger claps, right? Well, they could have done anything. They could have just not done any claps. They could have done a hi-hat. They could have put something in the headphones where you didn't hear. They were setting up a time signature for how they were going to sing. They chose to do that to make it sound organic, okay? So in other words, they want you to keep some Moet Chandon, right? Here, doing that, the vibe is like everyone's in a room. It's like a quartet or something, and they're all just kind of, doing this opera piece or this play, so to speak, as they're going through it. So let me go ahead and play the instrumental. Check it out. Here we go.
She keeps a Moet Chandon in a pretty cabinet. Let them eat cake, she says, just like Marie Antoinette. Building a remedy for Khrushchev and Kennedy at any time, an invitation you can't decline.
Okay, so now, with that said, why that was important is because it sets us up for the motif of the whole thing of what's really going on. So Freddie's not here to, per se, necessarily showboat with his voice and show you how awesome he is. He's actually wowing us with his ability as a playwright, play singer, opera singer / not opera so much, but Broadway singer, to kind of intrigue us and engage us in this story. So with that said, now let's go back and listen to the melody alone. Check it out.
She keeps a Moet Chandon in a pretty cabinet. Let them eat cake, she says, just like Marie Antoinette.
Okay, cool. She keeps a Moet Chandon in a pretty cabinet, right? He's real gentle. Right? And he kind of goes into a head voice falsetto. By the way, the whole song is actually about a high-priced call girl, Killer Queen. So you look it up, you'll see it's really kind of about a hooker or, a paid call girl. So the lyrics are actually kind of humorous when you think about it. And if you go back and listen to the lyrics with a view towards that, that's also very telling of kind of the storytelling. So you can see a Broadway play with Freddie at the piano, or the woman at the piano on the one side, and the guy walks in and he's telling the story. I think that's really intriguing. Let's continue.
Building a remedy for Khrushchev and Kennedy.
Now, about the compartmentalizing or the writing orchestrating different parts at each time. So she keeps him away in Shandong in a pretty cabinet. Right? He's got that ding, 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 ba-ding, ding, ding, almost like a Beatles vibe, right? And then all of a sudden it breaks into this.
Building a remedy for Khrushchev and Kennedy at any time, an invitation you can't decline.
Kind of like the circus, right? You know. So that's kind of the vibe that I get as I'm going through this, and I'm going, that's genius. I mean, genius. How long did it take them to think of this stuff, right? So the composition, and by the way, too, I have to add this, guys. I don't live in the past. I've said this before, but we're not getting this kind of songwriting anymore. We're not getting this kind of creativity. We're not getting this kind of genius. You know, none of that is coming out of modern music anymore, unfortunately. So we're kind of listening to a dying breed of a lot of people that, you know, spend a lot of time coming up with all these different parts. And each player plays their part. So in other words, when all of a sudden the guitar parts come in, it's like it's this orchestra of guitars that are so well thought out. Brian May's guitar playing. In fact, if you get a chance to listen to some of my own stuff, I was a huge am a huge Brian May fan and a Freddie fan, just the orchestration, everything alone. But everything, I mean, it didn't matter from the bass playing, the drumming, whatever, everybody could sing. All of it's orchestrated and everybody knows their role and how to meticulously play their part and go home and come up with their own cool thing. And I know Roy Thomas Baker played a huge role in this as far as producing the albums or some of these earlier albums as well. So let's continue. Here we go. I'm going to take the instrumental out.
Caviar and cigarettes, well versed in etiquette, extraordinarily nice. She's a killer queen, gunpowder gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam, guaranteed to blow your mind.
Okay, now let me point some things out about that. First of all, Freddie is real easy on, he's real gentle on the voice. I'll sing some more in a minute. But I get the feeling that if they had had a little choir or quartet choir, they would have used it. But because Night of the Opera and like Bohemian Rhapsody, and I know this was kind of a little bit of an extension of that to some degree, I know that they really had developed such a unique Queen choral sound that it's kind of cool that they stayed with that sound so it's identifiable, and they didn't go the route of just getting a choir or someone to do their work for them. They did it themselves. So with the view towards that, one other thing too, Freddie sounds a little stuffy these days, as he did sometimes. I know he used to drink a lot. I'm not sure how much blow he did back in the day, but I know that there were some drug issues and some things along the way. So you can kind of hear that too as you're listening to how stuffy he is in the sound. Listen, check it out.
Caviar and cigarettes, well versed in etiquette, extraordinarily nice.
Hear it?
She's a killer queen, gunpowder gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam.
Now, I want to point out, I know I'm being picky about something in a cool way. Right? If you listen really closely to the background vocals, they're actually following the chords. They're not hitting the same chord stabs, or meaning like triads of a chord. So they're not singing the same chord composition within the choral of vocals themselves. The background vocal harmonies within the chords are changing to match the instrumentation. Check it out.
Queen, gunpowder gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam.
Hear that? Hear the movement of the chords? Let's do it one more time. Check it out.
Queen, gunpowder gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam, guaranteed to blow.
Now hear it with the track, and you'll hear why that happens.
Queen, gunpowder gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam, guaranteed.
There's a chord change that happens, and they accommodate that in their vocals. And if you guys think this is like, stupid, it's pretty crazy having to go through all this kind of orchestration and match all this stuff back to back. But I wanted to point out the genius of this along the way. This isn't just banging out a few chords and coming up with a hit song, right? And then they come up with that.
To blow your mind.
Bop, bop.
Ooh, recommended at the price, insatiable in appetite. Wanna try? To avoid complications.
Now, as you go through this, there are three major components. the beginning, which kind of echoes again in the second verse, the da 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 section, and then it morphs into a third part. Then it goes back and repeats itself. So they're building this, like I said, it's a lot like movie orchestration. Well, they'll start with a theme or some kind of an intro, they'll build it up, and they'll come in with a theme to tell the story, and they come back and revisit it, and that's exactly what they're doing, like a play. So if you notice, a lot of Broadway plays or musicals and rock operas, whatever, are turned into movies because there's a lot of similarities, especially in the musical composition, how that plays out, which I think is also very telling and very interesting.
She never kept the same address. In conversation, she spoke just like a baroness. Met a man from China, went down to Geisha Minor. Then again, incidentally, if you're that way inclined.
Now, most people, when they're orchestrating background vocals to a lead vocal, try to pick off stab, like a gospel choir would do. They try to pick up a stab of what the lead vocal, she's a killer queen, dynamite with the laser beam, da-da-da, but the da-da-da, guaranteed to blow your mind anytime, right? So they try to pick off different components of the lead vocal to accentuate it. They chose not to do that here. Instead, what they did was they ran another counter, melody, sort of counter, choral melody, or I shouldn't say melody, but, group choral behind it, that the lyric is different or saying different things. Most of the time that could be pretty confusing. They were able to orchestrate it in a way it's not here. Check it out.
Conversation, she spoke just
Right
like
here.
a baroness. Met a man from China, went down to Geisha Minor. Then again, incidentally, if you're that way inclined.
Killer, she's a killer queen, right? So they have this cool little backdrop. Now, what that's done is they've taken the hook, killer queen, and subliminally planted it in the back of your mind, and it almost makes you think that Freddie's singing that when he's not. That's also genius and an old movie trick, an old film composition trick that's used quite often to subliminally state something over and over again, kind of hammer it home. So that's also, and I don't know if this was that intentional, but that's used a lot in different film and TV techniques. So.
Met a man from China, went down to Geisha Minor. Then again, incidentally, if you're that way inclined. Perfume came naturally.
Now, if you noticed, too, this was so well orchestrated, they didn't stop this time and the vocal didn't stop. Instead, he decided that he's going to overlap the vocal into the next phrase and start this over again without any pauses, any hesitation. So it goes boom right into the next part. Check it out.
Gently, if you're that way inclined. Perfume came naturally from Paris. Because she couldn't care less. Fastidious and precise. She's a killer.
I never knew, but still he's precise. It sounds like a British guy. Oliver, right? I think of, kind of early British musicals, what's it like? You guys know the movie Oliver and stuff, it's right in time, right? If she's all put to right? I sort of get that vibe. Anyway, let's continue.
Queen gunpowder gelatine.
Oh, by the way, interesting too, another little recording side note. You hear this plosive, the kind of sound happen often. When you close mic, it's why you see windscreens in front of a lot of these mics and stuff. Now, there's a technique that I use when I record in the other room. You say, well, you don't use when you're doing your vocal demonstrations. The reason I'm not using it as much as I did early on is because people want to see my face or the face of my singers. So if you take the mic and you put it off axis and you sing the wind across the mic this way rather than head on, it's less likely to have these plosives, these explosions, right? Which is P, plosive, or B, or anything that's got a sound in it. But you hear it over and over again because they didn't do that here. And so, in fact, by the way, I forget what Aerosmith video it is, but it's Steven Tyler singing into something, and you can see him singing across the mic, and it's him working up some song. You can check it on YouTube. I forget where it is, but you can see this technique. I use this in my room all the time now because that way we can just have the mic off axis. You can see the whole singer, etc. They chose not to do that here, so you hear the plosive. Listen.
Queen gunpowder gelatine.
Gotten by with a da-da-da.
Queen gunpowder gelatine. Dynamite with a laser beam. Guaranteed.
Laser beam again, right?
Gelatine. Dynamite with a laser beam. Guaranteed to blow your mind.
Now, because I'm a guitar fan, I can't help but just admire Brian May's orchestration, because Brian also takes an approach of orchestration in his playing. Very orchestral guitar player. So he'll have all these cool harmonies, really well thought out parts, and he's a great player from a mechanical standpoint, from an articulation standpoint, a phrasing standpoint, phenomenal guitar player. But he chooses also to play as a role of an orchestrator within the song, and here we see that in the playing. Okay, now the reason I pointed that out is for you players out there that just noodle little, diarrhea fingers, right? And maybe there isn't even that many people out there anymore. I'm an 80s guy, so I was a diarrhea fingers guy for a long time. If you notice, he is reminiscent of the melody. So he comes back and he reinforces, reminding you, like a good movie does. You notice the theme keeps coming back in a movie. It might be in a major key. It might be in a minor key. It might have a combination thereof. But they keep hammering this theme home over and over again. He just did that with his guitar. He just kind of gave you a nuance and reminded you of this melody on guitar, but in an orchestral guitar cool kind of way, where it's not obnoxious and you feel like, oh, not the melody again. You're like, oh, that's really cool. A way of bringing that back and reminding us of the melody. I just think that's genius. Here we go.
Drop of a hat, she's as willing as, playful as a pussycat.
See, and then he's here, playful as a pussycat. Wow, right? Check it out.
Drop of a hat, she's as willing as, playful as a pussycat. The momentarily out of action, temporarily out of gas, so absolutely dry.
Major key, minor key, you hear that? All these different tones.
She's out to get you. She's a killer queen, gunpowder gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam, guaranteed to blow your mind. Anytime. Ooh, recommend.
Anytime. Right? Now, Freddie's approach to this whole song, we're going to get to in a minute because I want to do it with the track, and I don't want this to be too long, but I want you to kind of get the vibe of this.
And it at the price, insatiable and appetite. Wanna try?
Then they leave you with this boom, ba-gang-gang, gong-gong, ba-gang-gang, and you're thinking, is that the end? And you're going, is it the end? And now you know the song, of course you know it's the end, but what they're actually doing is they're setting you up for a segueing into another song on the record. Back in the day, people made records. They didn't make singles, they made records. And so most of the albums, or a lot of the albums, were thematic, and they would have really good ones. They would have a theme. And they would have one song that would kind of go into another song. We see those bands like Boston, Foreplay, right? They got that, and then it morphs into a song, and then that song, Yes songs, or all these amazing bands back then would have, the whole album would have a concept. And so they'd go, like storytelling, they'd take you from one thing, a journey, to another journey of another song, and all completely different. And just like a rock opera or a play or a movie or this, that. And so they're kind of leaving you hanging to give you a segue to another song, right? So there's a lot that goes into this, guys. I'm telling you, man. But I want to go ahead and play this now with the track, and I want to talk about some vocal stuff along the way.
She keeps a Moet Chandon in a pretty cabinet. Let them eat cake, she says, just like Marie Antoinette.
She keeps a Moet Chandon in a pretty cabinet. And then I forget, let them eat cake, she says, just like Marie Antoinette, right? So he's drawing on a lot of historical things. By the way, Marie Antoinette didn't actually say let them eat cake. She was ascribed to that. She said some other things that were really nasty, and it implied that she didn't care about the peasants or the citizens, and so they basically killed her for it. But anyway, but it was so notorious, he's using that analogy of not giving a crap about anybody as the killer queen or the call girl, and he's starting to build the story immediately right out of the gate with history, which he did a lot of too, which I thought was cool. Right? Let's continue.
Building a remedy for Khrushchev and Kennedy at any time, an invitation you can't decline.
Okay, now, not to take away from Sgt. Pepper, and not to take away from Queen, but to add to Sgt. Pepper or early Beatles stuff, I want you to notice the Beatles' influence in this. Check it out.
Building a remedy for Khrushchev and Kennedy at any time, an invitation you can't decline. Caviar.
Now, there's a definitely Freddie flair because Freddie was much more theatrical. Let me just say it that way. And I know I use that word a lot in this context, but it is, right? So he's very theatrical.
Cigarettes, well-versed in etiquette.
And but well-versed in etiquette, right? He's using a lot of chest and he makes. Now, one other thing too is he liked to do a lot of in his writing is he'd love to take a chord and take it down and take it down and take it down and take it down one more time. So he'd do a lot of these, diminuendo. It's ironically they have an album called Innuendo. But so anyway, he would take a lot of these progressions that are fairly typical piano progressions or whatever, and then he'd quirk them up a little bit where he'd make their really quirky changes. So when you think you're expecting it to go another key, he takes you another direction so you can't quite figure him out. But he does use a lot of very well-known progressions at the time. By the way, I have a video out called How to Write a Song, and I cover all of this in my singing course. I have a whole entire section on songwriting, and I talk all about this because I've done a lot of music for film and television. I think you guys know I got about 1,000 songs placed in film and TV. I've done Baywatch, X-Files. I was a composer on a lot of stuff over the years, and so I have a lot of background in this. But anyways, let's continue.
Extraordinarily nice. She's a killer queen, gunpowder gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam, guaranteed to blow your mind. Recommended at the price.
Okay. Anyway, gang. So hopefully this was informative. You got to check out a lot of Freddie's stuff. Now, before we leave, or hold on, I want you to go. She's a killer queen, right? For you guys out there that want to sing in this style, it's almost entirely a mid-mix voice sound. So he's not pulling any chest into the sound. He's not belting, though we know Freddie can certainly belt. You can sit there and go and sing this whole thing kind of in a falsetto tone and just try to add a little bit of air. She's a killer. And go back and forth to where you don't hear that register break, and you can really get awfully close to this kind of sound by adding a lot of air into that sound, okay? Hopefully this was beneficial, and check out my next video.